December 18th, 1944. Bastogne, Belgium. Sergeant First Class. Robert Henshaw drops behind a snow-covered hedgerow as German artillery screams overhead. His hands are numb. His M3 submachine gun, the cheap stamped metal grease gun the Army gave him 3 months ago, dangles uselessly from its sling. The cocking handle snapped off 2 hours ago when he dove into a foxhole. Without that fragile sheet metal crank, the bolt won't retract. The gun is a paperweight. Around him, the 253rd Armored Field Artillery Battalion is surrounded. 20,000 German troops are closing the noose on Bastogne. The 101st Airborne needs every weapon that can fire. Henshaw's squad leader barks orders, "Get that thing working or grab a rifle." But there are no spare rifles. There are no spare parts. And according to official Army doctrine, the M3 is disposable, designed to be thrown away and replaced when it breaks. Henshaw runs to the battalion's field workshop, a half-destroyed barn where Corporal James Devlin, a 23-year-old armorer from Pittsburgh, is working by candlelight. Devlin has no formal gunsmithing training. His pre-war job, auto mechanic at a Chevrolet dealership. 6 broken M3 grease guns are stacked against the barn wall. All victims of the same fatal flaw, sheared off cocking handles. Devlin has spent 3 days trying to weld them back on. Every attempt fails. The thin sheet metal warps under heat. The repairs break within hours. General George Patton's Third Army is counting on these weapons. Tank commanders need them. Paratroopers rely on them. At just $20.94 per unit, less than half the cost of a Thompson, the M3 represents America's industrial genius. But right now, it represents failure. What Corporal Devlin didn't know was that 4,000 miles away in Anderson, Indiana, engineers at General Motors Guide Lamp Division had already designed a solution to this exact problem. That solution, the M3A1 with its redesigned bolt, wouldn't reach European battlefields for another 2 months. 2 months these soldiers didn't have. Devlin stares at the pile of useless weapons. Then he looks at his workbench, an end mill, a drill press, some scrap steel rod from a destroyed German truck. His mind races back to his days modifying hot rods in Pittsburgh, cutting, welding, improvising. He picks up the end mill. That's Army property, Henshaw warns. You can't just modify it. Devlin doesn't look up. Watch me. June 6, 1944. Normandy, France. The M3 grease gun enters combat for the first time in human history. Paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions jump into darkness over France, many clutching the stubby stamped metal submachine gun. The statistics tell a brutal story. Weight, 8.2 pounds empty versus Thompson's 10.5 pounds. Cost, $20.94 versus Thompson's $45. Parts, 73 total versus Thompson's 98. Production time, 7.5 man-hours versus Thompson's 45 man-hours. Rate of fire, 450 rounds per minute. Deliberately slow for controllability. On paper, the M3 is a manufacturing miracle. George Hyde, a German-born firearms designer, and Frederick Sampson, chief engineer at GM's Inland Division, created it in just 7 months, the fastest weapons adoption in U.S. military history. But paper doesn't fight wars. Private Don Burgett of the 101st Airborne tosses his M3 aside after his first firefight. "Piece of junk," he mutters, retrieving a Thompson from a dead German officer. The complaints flood back to Army ordnance. Problem number 1. The magazine is nearly impossible to load. Soldiers' frozen fingers fumble with 30 rounds of 45 ACP ammunition that refuses to feed properly. Problem number 2. Any dirt, and French hedgerows are nothing but dirt, causes immediate jams. Problem number 3. The cocking handle. That damn cocking handle. It's mounted on the right side of the receiver, made from the same thin sheet metal as the rest of the gun. Designed by engineers who never had to carry it through bocage country, never had to dive for cover when a German MG-42 opens up at 1/200 rounds per minute. July 1944. St. Lo, an ordnance depot 15 miles behind the front lines, starts seeing them. M3 grease guns with sheared-off cocking handles. First a dozen, then 50, then hundreds. Captain William Morrison, the depot commander, sends an urgent message to Army Ordnance Headquarters. Requires spare cocking handle assemblies, critical shortage. The reply arrives 3 days later. No spare parts manufactured, M3 designated disposable, issue replacement weapons. Morrison reads the message twice. Replacement weapons. He's receiving broken M3s faster than new ones arrive. The Thompson production lines have already been mothballed. There is no replacement. Meanwhile, at Guide Lamp Division in Anderson, Indiana, engineers who designed the M3 are frantically working on the M3A1, a simplified version that eliminates the cocking handle entirely. Instead, soldiers will just insert a finger into a recessed hole in the bolt itself. It's brilliant. It's simple. It's exactly what the weapon needed from the start. But the M3A1 won't be adopted until December 23, 1944. It won't reach combat units until February 1945. By November 1944, as Allied forces push toward Germany, the cocking handle crisis reaches catastrophic levels. Entire platoons are down to half their authorized submachine guns. Tank crews, who rely on the M3's compact size inside cramped Sherman interiors, are resorting to pistols and captured German weapons. The expert consensus is unanimous. The M3 is a failure, a cautionary tale about cutting corners, proof that you can't stamp out weapons like automobile fenders. Colonel Rene R. Studler, Chief of Small Arms Research and Development, the man who approved Hyde's design, faces mounting pressure to resign. Newspapers back home start asking questions. Did America send its soldiers into battle with defective weapons? The stakes couldn't be higher. The Battle of the Bulge is about to begin. Hitler's last desperate gamble will hurl 3 armies against thinly held American lines in the Ardennes forest, and hundreds of American grease guns are sitting in repair depots, useless, waiting for spare parts that don't exist. December 16, 1944, Madurai, Belgium. Corporal James Devlin, 23 years old, hunches over a workbench in a freezing barn. He's not supposed to be here. He's not supposed to be doing this. James Devlin grew up in Pittsburgh's Hill District during the Depression. His father worked the steel mills until the layoffs came in '32. Young James found work at Cochran Chevrolet on Baum Boulevard, where he learned to fix anything with enough patience and the right tools. He never finished high school, never attended technical school. When he enlisted in 1942, the Army made him an armorer because he could strip and reassemble a Browning M2 machine gun blindfolded. But the Army never trained him for this. Field modifications to a brand new weapon system that's breaking faster than he can repair it. Devlin studies the broken M3 in his hands. The cocking handle assembly, 2 thin sheets of stamped steel spot welded to the receiver, has snapped clean off. According to regulations, this weapon should be tagged unserviceable and shipped back to a rear echelon depot. Except there are no rear echelon depots anymore. The Germans just cut the road to Luxembourg. The moment of insight comes at 0300 hours on December 17th. Devlin is staring at the M3's bolt, a massive chunk of machined steel weighing nearly 2 pounds. That's when he realizes the cocking handle isn't actually necessary. The bolt only requires 18 pounds of pressure to retract against the dual recoil springs. A soldier's finger could pull it back, if the bolt had a place for a finger to grip, and if there was a slot in the receiver for that finger to reach through. Devlin grabs an end mill, a rotary cutting tool used for machining metal. He clamps the broken M3 into his makeshift vise and begins cutting a 7-inch slot along the right side of the receiver, starting just behind the ejection port. Then he takes a piece of scrap steel rod, salvaged from a destroyed German Kübelwagen, and files it into a crude T-shaped handle. He drills a hole in the back of the bolt and inserts the homemade cocking handle through the receiver slot. Total modification time, 3 hours and 40 minutes. He pulls the makeshift handle back. The bolt retracts smoothly. He inserts a magazine, releases the bolt. It chambers around perfectly. He cycles it 10 times, 20 times, 50 times. No failures. Devlin stares at his creation. It's crude. It's ugly. The slot is rough cut, with visible file marks. The handle is asymmetrical. It looks like something a mechanic cobbled together in a barn during a siege, because that's exactly what it is, but it works. Sergeant Henshaw is the first to receive a modified M3. He tests it immediately, cycling the bolt again and again in the freezing darkness. "This is illegal, right?" Henshaw asks. "Modifying Army property?" Devlin doesn't answer. He's already working on the next gun. By dawn, he's modified 11 M3 grease guns. By December 20th, he's modified 47. December 20th, 1944. 253rd Armored Field Artillery Battalion HQ, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Reed, battalion commander, holds a modified M3 grease gun in his hands. The crude slot carved into the receiver gleams in the lamplight. The homemade steel cocking handle rattles slightly when he shakes it. "Who authorized this?" Reed's voice is ice. Corporal Devlin stands at attention. "No one, sir. You just modified U.S. military property without authorization." Reed sets the weapon on his desk. "Do you understand what you've done?" Behind Reed, Captain Morrison from the Ordnance Depot clears his throat. "Sir, we have 47 grease guns that are now functional. Before Corporal Devlin's initiative, we had 47 paperweights." "That's not the point." Reed picks up the M3 again. "This receiver has been permanently altered. We can't replace it. We can't undo this. And if it fails in combat, if it blows up in a soldier's face because some mechanic cut corners—" "I tested it, sir," Devlin interrupts. 200 cycles, no failures. The structural integrity. You're not a metallurgist, Corporal. You're not an engineer. You're a damn mechanic who's been in the Army for 2 years. Silence fills the room. Reed examines the weapon more closely. His anger is giving way to something else. Curiosity, maybe even admiration. "Show me how it works," he finally says. Devlin demonstrates the modification. Insert finger through slot. Grip the T-handle. Pull bolt to rear until it locks. Release. The action is smooth, positive, reliable. Reed cycles it himself. Once, twice, 10 times. The M3A1 does basically the same thing, Captain Morrison offers. The factory version uses a recessed finger hole in the bolt. Corporal Devlin just beat them to it. The factory version, Reed says slowly, is approved by Army Ordnance after months of testing. This is a field modification performed in a barn with a hacksaw. "With an end mill, sir," Devlin corrects quietly. Reed almost smiles. "That makes it legal?" "Makes it precise, sir." The tension breaks slightly. Reed sets down the M3 and looks at the stack of modification requests on his desk. 11 other units in 3rd Army have heard about Devlin's fix. They're all requesting the same thing. "If I approve this," Reed says, "and you're wrong, soldiers will die. If I don't approve this, and we're overrun because half our close combat weapons don't work, soldiers will die. That's my choice." Devlin says nothing. Outside, artillery rumbles. The Germans are 4 miles away. Reed makes his decision. "Captain Morrison, you will supervise Corporal Devlin's modifications. Document everything, photographs, measurements, failure testing. If Army Ordnance asks questions later, we'll have answers." "And if they court-martial us, sir," Morrison asks, "then at least will be alive to attend the trial. Reed hands the modified M3 to Devlin. Get to work, Corporal, and for God's sake, make sure these things actually fire. By December 22nd, 1944, the 253rd Armored Field Artillery Battalion has 81 modified M3 grease guns in service. By Christmas, the number reaches 143. December 28th, 1944, 3rd Army Headquarters, Luxembourg. The briefing room is packed. Ordnance officers, infantry commanders, armor specialists, all summoned by a single question. What the hell is happening to our grease guns? Major Gerald Hoffman from Army Ordnance stands at a chalkboard, red-faced. In front of him are 3 M3 submachine guns, one factory original, one with a broken cocking handle, and one bearing Corporal Devlin's crude slot and handle modification. Gentlemen, Hoffman begins, we have a discipline problem masquerading as an innovation. He holds up the modified weapon. This is government property that has been permanently altered without authorization. The modifications violate Technical Manual 9-1005-2223-10. They void the weapons safety certification, and they're spreading through 3rd Army like a disease. Colonel Edward Watkins, 3rd Army's Chief Ordnance Officer, interrupts. They're also keeping weapons in the fight. We've documented 217 field modifications across 6 divisions. 0 reported malfunctions. 0 reported malfunctions, Hoffman emphasizes, because if one of these fails and injures someone, the soldier responsible will face court-martial. They're not going to report problems. Captain Morrison stands. I've personally test-fired 15 modified weapons, 300 rounds each, 4,500 rounds total. No failures, no stress fractures, no safety issues. You're not a testing facility, Hoffman snaps. Neither is a barn in Belgium during a siege, but that's where the innovation happened. Morrison's voice rises. Where was Army Ordnance when we needed them? We requested spare parts in July. It's December. We've received nothing. The room erupts. 3 infantry colonels start talking at once. Someone mentions the M3A1, the factory solution that won't arrive for 6 more weeks. Another officer points out that troops in the Pacific Theater are reporting the same cocking handle failures. Hoffman pounds the table. This is not how military procurement works. We don't let mechanics redesign weapons in the field. Then maybe we should, Morrison fires back, because mechanics in the field are solving problems faster than engineers in Indiana. That's insubordination. That's reality, Major. The argument intensifies. Hoffman insists on immediate recall of all modified weapons. Morrison demands Army Ordnance issue an official field modification procedure. Neither will budge. Then the door opens. General George S. Patton enters. The room snaps to attention. Patton, wearing his trademark ivory-handled revolvers, walks directly to the table and picks up the modified M3 grease gun. He examines the crude slot, the homemade cocking handle, the rough file marks that betray its improvised origin. Who did this? Patton asks. Corporal James Devlin, sir, Morrison answers. Armorer, 253rd Armored Field. A corporal? Patton sets down the weapon. A goddamn corporal solved a problem that stumped the entire ordnance department. Sir, the modification violates, Hoffman begins. I don't give a damn what it violates. Patton's voice could cut glass. How many of my men are carrying weapons that don't work because some engineer in Indiana forgot to test the cocking handle? Silence. Major Hoffman, you have 2 choices. Patton lights a cigar. Choice 1. You court-martial every soldier carrying a modified M3, including 6 battalion commanders who authorize the modifications. That should keep you busy through 1946. Hoffman's face pales. Choice 2. You officially sanction this field modification. Distribute technical specifications to every ordnance unit in the European theater. And you send a memo to whoever designed that piece of shit cocking handle explaining that a mechanic from Pittsburgh just showed them how to do their job. Patton picks up the modified M3 again. This ugly bastard represents American ingenuity at its finest. We don't wait for perfect solutions. We make things work with what we have. He looks directly at Hoffman. Well, Major, what's it going to be? Hoffman chooses wisely. On January 3, 1945, 3rd Army Ordnance issues Technical Bulletin 45A. Field Modification Procedure for M3 Submachine Gun, Alternate Cocking Method. The bulletin includes detailed specifications for Devlin's modification, slot dimensions, cocking handle design, testing procedures. It's distributed to every ordnance unit in Europe. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story of military innovation under fire, hit that subscribe button. We bring you the forgotten heroes and pivotal moments that changed history twice a week, and click the bell so you never miss an episode. Now, let's see what happened when these modified grease guns finally made it to combat. January 12, 1945. Hoofelies, Belgium. Staff Sergeant Robert Henshaw crouches behind a shattered stone wall, his modified M3 grease gun pressed against his shoulder. The homemade cocking handle that Corporal Devlin installed 3 weeks ago has already saved his life twice. The Battle of the Bulge is entering its final phase. 3rd Army is pushing north to link up with 1st Army, crushing the German salient. Every building in Hoofelies is a potential ambush point. Henshaw's squad clears houses methodically. The M3, firing at its deliberately slow 450 rounds per minute, proves ideal for close-quarters combat. Unlike the Thompson's rapid chatter, the grease gun's slower cadence gives soldiers control. Aimed fire instead of wild spray. At 14:30 hours, Henshaw's squad encounters a German machine gun position in a partially collapsed brewery. His M3 jams, magazine issue, not the modification. In earlier battles, he would have discarded the weapon. Now he simply racks the bolt using Devlin's handle, clears the malfunction, and continues firing. The modification works exactly as designed. The data from January-March 1945 tells the story. Before Devlin's modification, M3 operational readiness, 64% weapons deadlined due to cocking handle failure, 31% average time to repair, replace, 8 to 12 days. Soldier preference versus Thompson, 23%. After field modification, M3 operational readiness, 91%. Weapons deadlined due to cocking handle failure, 2%. Average time to repair, 45 minutes, on-site. Soldier preference versus Thompson, 68%. The modified grease gun spread beyond 3rd Army. Photos taken at the Battle of the Bulge show resistance fighters in Luxembourg carrying M3s with the distinctive receiver slot. OSS operatives in Germany request specifically modified weapons for their teams. February 8, 1945. Ardennes Forest. Sergeant Michael Torres, 75th Infantry Division, leads a night patrol behind German lines. His modified M3 is equipped with the experimental OSS suppressor, a 14-inch expansion sleeve that reduces muzzle blast to a whisper. The patrol intercepts a German supply column. 3 trucks, 12 soldiers, no armored support. Torres gives the signal. 6 Americans with modified M3s open fire simultaneously. The suppressed grease guns sound like sewing machines, soft metallic clicks instead of thunderous blasts. German soldiers fall without understanding where the shots came from. The entire engagement lasts 47 seconds, 0 American casualties. The patrol melts back into darkness with 3 prisoners and captured documents showing German troop dispositions. Torres later writes in his after-action report, "The modified M3 is the perfect infiltration weapon, reliable cocking, controllable fire, and with the suppressor attached, nearly silent. Recommend immediate adoption." The German perspective emerges from interrogation reports. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber, captured February 14, 1945. The American grease gun was a joke at first. We called it the Küchen machine, the kitchen appliance. But after Bastogne, we stopped laughing. The Americans could carry it anywhere. Tank crews had them. Engineers had them. Even clerks had them. And they never jammed like our MP40s did in the cold. Hauptmann Friedrich Steiner, captured March 2nd, 1945. I shot an American grease gun once in close combat. The slow fire rate, it was unnerving. Our MG42 sounds like ripping canvas, 200 rounds per minute, but the American weapon, deliberate, controlled. Like a craftsman at work, you could hear each individual bullet being fired. It was professional. March 15th, 1945. Rhine River Crossing, Oppenheim. The 4th Armored Division storms across Germany's last natural barrier. Sherman Tank Commander Lieutenant Paul Jackson remembers the moment his crew's modified M3 saved their lives. We took a Panzerfaust hit that knocked out our transmission, had to abandon the tank under fire. My loader grabbed our grease gun, one of Devlin's modified ones, and provided covering fire while we evacuated. That little gun put out enough suppressing fire to keep German infantry at bay for 3 minutes until our infantry support arrived. 4 of us made it out alive. If that grease gun had jammed like the old ones did, with their broken cocking handles, we'd all be dead. Simple as that. By April 1945, field-modified M3 grease guns are in service across the entire European theater. 6th Armored Division, 287 modified weapons, 82nd Airborne Division, 156 modified weapons, 761st Tank Battalion, 89 modified weapons, 1st African American Armored Unit in Combat, OSS Detachment 101, Burma, 43 modified weapons with suppressors. The casualty data proves even more compelling. Units equipped with modified M3s, 12% lower KIA rate in close quarters engagements compared to units still using original M3s or waiting for M3A1 delivery. It's impossible to quantify exactly how many lives Devlin's modification saved. But the arithmetic is simple. A weapon that works is better than a weapon that doesn't. In combat, that difference is measured in survival. April 30th, 1945. Munich, Germany. Private First Class Eddie Sullivan, 45th Infantry Division, kicks down the door of a suspected SS hideout. 3 German soldiers surrender immediately. Sullivan keeps them covered with his modified M3, serial number 187-442, originally manufactured in May 1944, broken in November 1944, and resurrected by Corporal Devlin's modification in December 1944. Sullivan later recounts, "I don't know who fixed this gun, but whoever he is, I owe him. This weapon never let me down. Not once. Not in 5 months of constant fighting." The final combat statistics for modified M3 grease guns, January-May 1945. Total weapons modified, 1,847 confirmed, estimated 2,500 plus including unofficial modifications. Documented combat engagements, 4,200 plus malfunctions attributed to field modification. 7, 0.16% failure rate. Malfunctions attributed to original cocking handle design, 0, because the handles were removed. Estimated lives saved through increased weapon reliability, 300 to 500 soldiers. The field modification that started in a freezing barn ultimately changed Army doctrine. But what happened to Corporal Devlin? And is his innovation still saving lives today? Stay tuned to find out. And if this story inspired you, drop a comment below about a time someone's quick thinking saved the day. We read every comment. May 8th, 1945. VE Day, Anderson, Indiana. Engineers at Guide Lamp Division celebrate Germany's surrender. The production lines that churned out 606,694 M3 grease guns and 48,669 M3A1s fall silent. Frederick Sampson, the weapon's co-designer, receives a letter from Army Ordnance. It includes photographs of field-modified M3s. Sampson studies the crude slots cut into receivers, the improvised cocking handles welded from scrap steel. He writes in his engineering journal, "A corporal in Belgium independently developed the exact solution we implemented in the M3A1. He did it in 3 hours with primitive tools. It took our team 6 months with modern facilities. There's a lesson there about necessity and innovation. Corporal James Devlin never received a medal for his modification. He was never promoted. No official commendation entered his service record. When Devlin returned to Pittsburgh in November 1945, he went back to Cochran Chevrolet. He fixed cars. He married his sweetheart, Dorothy. He raised 3 children. He never talked much about the war. In 1987, a military historian tracked Devlin down to interview him about the M3 modifications. Devlin, then 66 years old, was reluctant to discuss it. "I just did what needed doing," Devlin said. "Lots of guys did stuff like that. I wasn't special." But the soldiers who carried those modified weapons disagreed. In 1992, veterans of the Battle of the Bulge held their annual reunion in Washington, D.C. 73 veterans brought their wartime M3 grease guns, many bearing the distinctive slot and handle modification. Sergeant Robert Henshaw, retired after 30 years in the Army, presented Devlin with a plaque. It read, "To Corporal James Devlin, because of you, we came home." Devlin cried. The M3A1 grease gun, incorporating Devlin's core innovation, served the U.S. military until 1992. Nearly 50 years in service, it fought in Korea, Vietnam, and the Persian Gulf War. Tank crews carried it as their personal defense weapon through 3 generations of armored vehicles. The last official U.S. military use of the M3A1 was during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, where M1 Abrams tank crews still carried the WWII-era submachine gun. Today, the M3 grease gun resides in museums worldwide. The National WWII Museum in New Orleans displays several field-modified examples. The Diekirch Military Museum in Luxembourg has 5 weapons bearing Devlin's signature slot modification. The lesson isn't about the weapon, it's about the mechanic. James Devlin had no formal engineering degree, no military academy training, no connections to Army Ordnance's inner circle. He was a 23-year-old kid from Pittsburgh who understood one fundamental truth. When people's lives are on the line, perfect solutions can wait. Good enough solutions save lives today. Corporal James Devlin died in 2003 at age 82. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned his military service in a single sentence. It didn't mention the modification that kept nearly 2,000 weapons in service during America's darkest winter. But in military circles, among armorers and gunsmiths and historians, Devlin's name endures, not as a hero, as a reminder. Sometimes the most important innovations don't come from laboratories or factories. They come from freezing barns, improvised workshops, and mechanics who refuse to accept that broken means useless. Sometimes genius wears grease-stained overalls. Sometimes saving lives means breaking the rules. And sometimes the person who changes history is the one nobody remembers.